I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we are going to play with the bread bag, the sandwich bag, the gallon Ziploc bag method, where we add our yarn and dry dye powder into the bag, smush things around to get more coverage of the dye on the yarn, and then to see where we end up with our colors. This technique is a lot of fun because it adds some of the randomness that you get from, say, when you layer dyes in a mason jar, but it allows you to have a little bit more control over the coverage. You help the dye move through the yarn, and it can create something really fun in the end. Now, previously I have done this technique with a single color using fiber reactive dyes on cotton, and I have done this technique using 3 colors in the same family on some wool, superwash wool yarn. Today, I want to pick 2 primary colors, add them in approximately equal-ish amounts, and then see how much we really blend these colors versus how much is left from this method. Do we end up going full green, or will we see some of these blues and yellows left over in the end? I'm very curious to find out. Before we get started, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to today's lab partner, Michelle. Michelle, thank you so much for being my lab partner, and I really hope you're gonna love how this yarn turns out. The 2 colors that I picked today are Sapphire Blue and Brilliant Yellow. I am now forgetting if Sapphire Blue or if it's Peacock Blue. One of them doesn't do very well in stock solution. It doesn't dissolve super well, but it does do well with the actual dyeing process. So it should work really, really nicely today. Today, we are gonna dye 200 grams of Knit Picks Swish DK yarn. This yarn is 100% superwash merino, and I've pre-soaked it in just some plain tap water for a little over 30 minutes. And now I want to remove 200 grams. I have some more yarn in here for another project, and it is wet, but I want to remove a lot of the liquid just at first. Here we go. That's pretty good. So now it's damp but not dripping. Even as a drip falls, it's not really dripping. Since we are using commercial dyes today, all of the tools and equipment that I'm using are dedicated for dyeing yarn and are never used for food. And when we're ready to start adding the dye, I'm gonna go put on my P100 respirator masks, safety glasses, and gloves. So that way, when dealing with the dry powder, you don't risk any inhalation or getting anything in your eye if there's a spill. I have added removable nylon zip ties onto the yarn because it helps keep things from getting tangled. But I will want to be careful as I'm moving things in the bag with this because I don't want to puncture the bag, but once we add more liquid and stuff, we will add it into a secondary container to contain any spills.
All right, let's arrange the yarn in the bag. I think this is one of the bags that I used previously. So I think what I want to do is add part of the yarn in, then we're going to sprinkle on a healthy amount of some yellow. I'm going to add some more yarn. And I am setting these spoons in a dry cup so that way I can come in and add more powder as needed. And a tiny bit more. Let's add some blue using a new spoon. I am saving these spoons so that way if I want more dye, I can easily do that. Okay. And then on the top, we're going to add a bit more blue. I probably should have started with the blue and then added the yellow. If I wanted to potentially keep any yellow, but you know, here we go. Okay, in this beaker I have 2 cups of water. I'm going to add a little over half of it and start squishing. Maybe I should close it now. Ooh, I already see some green. I haven't added any acid in here yet. Now at this stage, I do want to make sure that I remove as much of the air as possible. There might be some left, but we don't want to see if there's air in there, then we risk popping it. So we will add more liquid, and after the initial like few movements of the colors, that's when we will add acid. Because if we add acid too soon, then the colors won't spread nearly as far. The thing I really enjoy about this technique is that it gives you an element of control that you really don't have when you use mason jars, because once you layer the color and stuff in the jars, you can't move it. That is, ooh, this is so pretty. It looks very tie-dye. Very soft, very tie-dye. Now, we can always decide to add more dye later on. That is definitely a choice. Because I can even remove the yarn from the bag if I want to. This is the rest of the water that I had before. To this, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of white vinegar. And I'm also going to rinse off any extra dye that was on the spoons, just to leave no dye behind. And now I'm going to add this liquid, I think, to this side of our yarn. And now, the same thing, I want to try to remove all of the air. So that way, I can press and massage. There is still some air here. Okay, but actually, now that we have no open powder left, I'm gonna go take off my mask. All right. So we have actually, I mean, if you see when I squish it now, there is a little bit of color that is in that liquid. I'm not sure how much you can really see of the liquid. Let me see if I can squeeze some out. See, that liquid is looking really, really clear already, which is a lot of fun. Now, we have a few options at this point. We could go let it sit for 24 hours and then steam set it, or we can steam set it now, which is probably what I'm going to do. But I do actually want to look at it to see if we want to add any more color. Ooh, ooh, this is so pretty. And of course you're going to see, so this is gorgeous. There's very little white left. But we've got greens, blue, and yellow. I am not going to add more dye. I really, really like this. I like how matched the two sets are. I am going ahead and sticking it back in the bag. And yeah, there's a little bit of yellow that hasn't set, but most of the color has set. I'm gonna steam set it, I think, inside the bag, just because why not? So I'm gonna go set up a steamer basket. Okay, here's a steamer insert in my stainless steel pot. I think the last time I did this, I let it sit outside or at room temperature. I'm opening this up so that way the temperature change doesn't cause the air inside to swell. But I think I let it sit at room temperature last time, even though since most of the colors aren't moving on here very much, that waiting time isn't going to affect the colorway very much. So
I am going to place this in here, and once it gets steamy, I'll set a timer for 30 minutes to steam set this yarn. So Michelle, I really hope that you love the way that this colorway is turning out so far, even though we did the reveal on the earlier side. I wanted to talk a little bit more about why I'm heat setting this right now versus other times in the past where I think I let it wait longer. And one big reason is my production. I have a stove with 4 burners. That's limited space for me to dye yarn, and sometimes it makes more sense for me to plan things where I can use a cool vat approach, let the yarn and the dye and the acid set for many hours, even days at room temperature, and then to steam set it later on when I can then have the steamer basket sort of going all day and swap things in and out. So if I'm using the stove for something else, maybe something low immersion, then it's not available for steam setting. And so then it can really make sense. Now, there are cases where using a cool vat, especially if you're going for something tonal or semi-solid, can help you get more even coverage because you're allowing that dye to strike to the yarn really, really slowly. In this case, it does seem like a lot of the color struck to the yarn already, so giving it that slow time isn't really going to change the colorway very much at all. At least the way I'm thinking of it at this moment. But it could. And there are cases where it can make a difference. And so it's always fun. You could set up side by side, steam right away, steam after 24 hours, and see how that goes. But the real thing that really emphasizes when I decide to cool that versus steam right away is the other projects that I'm working on that day and what space I have available on my stove. Now, I do plan out my projects and what I'm going to film on one day based on, okay, what needs to be set right away? What can I leave for 24 hours? And so that's part of my workflow to allow me to work on the filming of multiple videos at once. So I do plan that intentionally. But I think, and I could be remembering wrong, I think that last time I did the sandwich bag method, I wondered, well, I probably could have just gone ahead and steam set this right away. I didn't even necessarily need to keep it in the bag to steam set. I'm not entirely sure why I decided to put the bag in there, given that we already looked at the yarn, but we have the bag in there. I don't think it's gonna hurt. So anyway, I will be back once the timer goes off, and then we can set aside the yarn to cool. Okay, the 30 minutes are up, and this is so cool. We did get some blending of colors, but we definitely also have yellows and blues left, which is really exciting. So I'm gonna set this aside to cool. Yeah, you can't really see. I'm gonna set this aside to cool completely so we can wash it. Let's wash this yarn. And I know we already did the reveal, but through steaming, it looks like our colors have remained nicely. I am curious to see whether or not we'll have any bleeding, just because, I don't know. It's funny when I can't remember which glue it is that causes problems, but I'm not seeing any bleeding yet. Let's add some soap. Clearly it looks like there's already a little bit of soap in the wash basin. And while we're at it, go ahead and rinse out my bag, which I don't think is leaking. So I think that we will be able to save and reuse this another day as well. Okay, but now let's look and see. Okay, maybe we have a little bit of some blue coming out. Not enough to change the color, but just in case we had some undissolved powder that is now coming out, I am gonna add a bit more dish soap and let this soak for maybe 10 minutes. The time isn't really that important, but it will give some time for anything to dissolve that needs to. And so then we'll come back. Yeah, I forgot to come back for a bit. Oh dear. But hopefully this nice long soak will help anything that wasn't dissolved to come out. And now, hopefully our water will be clear. All right. I'm still seeing a hint. All right, let's see. Oh, that's looking better. All right, so I'm now gonna go and put the yarn through my spin dryer and hang it up to dry. When I first took these skeins out of our Ziploc bag and we did our first mini reveal, I did not wait long this time at all. I felt like the skeins were fairly well matched, but although there are similarities between them, they are actually not quite as matched as maybe I thought, which honestly stands to reason because we're doing this whole random technique. They are extraordinarily similar, but this is absolutely a case where if you had multiple skeins, you would want to alternate when knitting to blend it together if you didn't want there to be a transition from when you moved from one to another, because they do look like different dye lots even though they were dyed together. I am so surprised that we have so much blue and yellow in here. I mean, maybe the blue doesn't surprise me as much, but I was really expecting to have a lot more green. Thinking about, especially when I mixed some leftover green and yellow together a while ago for a Leave No Dye Behind, and the overall thing was very, very green because there I was doing full immersion, like space dyeing in a pot, so it made sense the color spread more. Here we started with powders, but even before I added the acid, the colors spread because we have really, really good coverage of the colors on the yarn. There are very, very few white patches in here, but they did not blend together that much. And so this is really, really exciting. Now, if I wanted to get more green, I could have blended where I placed the dyes more. But given that the last time I did this with acid dyes, we ended up with something so soft. But there was a softness there because we started with colors that were pretty similar. This time I wanted to start with two primary colors to see where it would take us. And I'm sure that to some extent, if I kept pressing and mixing a little bit, we may have ended up with more green. But the colors struck pretty quickly, which is not always the case, but is sometimes the case depending on the colors that you're using. Michelle, thank you so much for being my lab partner for this episode of Dye Pot Weekly. And I really hope that you enjoyed this video and will love your yarn. If you would like to learn more about how to become a Dye Pot Weekly lab partner, go and check out the listings in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. If the listings are currently sold out, go ahead and send me a message on Etsy and I can add you to a waiting list to notify when I release more. Of course, my shop is also filled with hundreds of skeins of hand-dyed yarn featured in my videos, including some ChemKnits Hanukkah samplers that are still available in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. Hanukkah is so much fun where you can unwrap a mini skein of hand-dyed yarn while watching a new ChemKnits yarn dyeing video every single night of Hanukkah, and the whole thing is so much fun. I will have a link to that as well down in the video description below. But anyway, Michelle, thank you again for supporting this video and being my lab partner. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and my list of videos I want to create keeps growing and growing and growing. I always write down requests and comments that I see on these videos, but also each time I do a video, I want to tweak and play around with the technique a bit more, which is why sometimes you see certain themes and spurts in the way the videos are released. But I am just so inspired with playing around with different ways to apply color to yarn. And if you enjoyed the content, please make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, and give the video a thumbs up. This is the biggest way by far that you can help support the content here. Thank you so much for watching.